Now that we are good with file management, let's take a look at background tasks. So everything we have done until now were somehow started by a user section. So you needed to click a link or open a control direction, hit a button, whatever, but the user started the events that happened and where some of our codes has run. Now, background tasks in Orchard are a very simple way to create tasks, write some code that will be either periodically or sometime in the future be executed. And that's it. Without user interaction, it will be just automatically run. The simplest version of background tasks is, well, just a simple iBackground task implementation. So we could create a task. Background tasks are basically services, we should probably put that class into the services namespace. And let's create a background task here. I don't have a better name for it because it won't actually do anything useful. We'll just look at it from the background. To create a background task, you just need to create a class called anything, and it needs to implement the iBackground task interface. So just as we have seen with the permission provider example, where we also implemented an interface and it was magically detected by Orchard, background tasks are quite similar. You just implement an interface and the rest will be taken care of. In this case, we just have a single sweep method that's a void and also doesn't have any parameters, so it's super simple. What will happen here? A background task will be periodically, well, swept or fired. By default, they will be run every minute, but this is configurable, by the way. But 1 minute is kind of a good default. And that means that every minute, every background tasks sweep method will be called. That's it. There's no other guarantee, there is no other requirement that you need to do, just that. So what we await here is that this method will be called in maximum 1 minute's time once I reload the site. So again, dynamic compilation, I just hit Ctrl-Shift-S. And once the site loads, I will attach the debugger. What I've written here with debugger.break is just an instruction for the debugger that if you hit this, please just stop. And we will be able to pretty much do the same just as if you would have a breakpoint here. Now, background tasks are really like this. When is it useful to use background tasks? Well, generally speaking, again, if you want to do something without user interaction. For example, if you want to do some cleanup on the site's content or among the media files, get rid of old content, for example. Also, you can schedule, maybe sending emails in form of a background task. But we already have services for that in Orchard and even external services, just a basic example. And now you can see our sweep method was actually run. So, it was automatically executed. If I continue the execution, it will be actually called again. But what we see here is that since we are using SQL-CE, no, it's actually not, I'm not sure if it's an SQL issue. But anyway, the issue was that probably we just took too much time at that breakpoint or at that break instruction, and the database session timeouted. That's basically that. Now, background tasks have, and you see again it was called. So let's stop debugging. Background tasks have a big brother or a bigger sibling or a more complicated version, and it's called scheduled task. Now, as mentioned, background tasks are simply executed every minute. But what if you want to execute something every 5 minutes, for example? Or you don't want to execute it periodically. You don't want to execute something periodically, but just one time in the future. Now, if you want all of those, then scheduled tasks are your friend. Because what do you need, or what do you have to do? Well, let's implement a scheduled task, and we'll see. Scheduled task. Let's name it. Again, this won't do anything too useful. And the scheduled task needs to implement an scheduled task handler interface. And the method in here is slightly more complicated than the sweep of background tasks. As you can see, this also has a scheduled task context as the parameter. And if you take a look at that, well, there is an iScheduled task wrapped into it. But if you take a look at that, there are three things. We have a task type. Now, why do we need a task type? We can create scheduled tasks with a given type, which is basically a name or an identifier for that given task. The thing here is that if you create a task for, I don't know, for notifying somebody of their birthday, so let's call it birthday task, then you can create multiple scheduled task handlers to actually do something when that task is being executed. So, for example, you can have 3 classes, not just one, listening to that task type. Or the other way around, you can have a single task handler working on multiple tasks. Well, schedule UTC is just the date when the task will be executed, and we can also have a corresponding content item in the context. So it's just that, so when you create the scheduled task, you can supply the content item, and when the scheduled task is executed, that content item will be supplied to the scheduled task handler too. But I think you will rarely need that. Okay, so we have a handler, but as mentioned, we also need to schedule the tasks somehow. And we will see something pretty cool, which is an iOrchard shell events thingy. What's that? Again, we are implementing an interface. And now, the iOrchard shell events is an event handler. If you take a look at it, the interface actually also derives from something called iEvent handler. This is a marker interface for event handler type interfaces. This is very similar in concept to .NET events, but in this case, as you can see, we have 2 methods to implement. Activated and terminating. Since we are talking about iOrchard shell events, these will be events in the Orchard shell's lifetime. So, without going much into details, basically the activated method will be called when the site is started. And the terminating method would be called when the site is stopping, but this actually doesn't happen because terminating is never called. So this is a scam. but the activity does work, so we can utilize that and do something when the orchard shell starts or when the orchard site starts. So I'm just removing the not implemented exception from terminating and moving activity to here, so they are together or activated. So let's schedule a scheduled task when the orchard site starts. And how can we schedule tasks? How can we schedule scheduled tasks? Well, we can schedule scheduled tasks with the scheduled task manager. And again, I will use the setter inject here. Oops. So let's inject a scheduled task manager. Let's see how we can create a scheduled task. There is a create task method, so that's telltale. We need a task type, so let's call it demo task. That's the task type we talked about before. And we need a date to schedule it. Again, we can use the iClock here, which we used before. And again, I will inject that iClock with the inject dependency feature of the Lombiq Visual Studio extension. So actually the datetime we use here should be UTC, a universal coordinated time, as everything is stored in UTC in Orchard. It's a good thing because the clock already gives us UTC, if I also add the namespace. Well, for the sake of the example, just add 1 minute to that. So what will happen? We will schedule a task to be executed in 1 minute in the future. So the effect will be pretty much the same as with background tasks, but yeah, it's different. It's the same but different, but still the same. And well, we can supply content item to the create task method to be part of the task context. But if you don't need that, you can just write null. Great. Now we have scheduled the task. By the way, we also touched onto these iOrchard shell events on a cool thing, as you do take notes of those. And the next thing is to actually do something when the scheduled task is executed. Shockingly, we will again use debugger.break, which, by the way, I'm sure you haven't heard of. So this is my gift to you. And since we are not in a background task, which will be executed regardless of what happens every minute, but in a scheduled task handler that will be executed for every task scheduled, we need to have some check here. So let's check for the task name or the task type in the context. And if it's not demo task, then let's not do something. Otherwise, let's break. And let me do again a reload, so this gets compiled. By the way, on the side note, I've copied this demo task string. Obviously, it would be nicer to have a constant in the class for that and reuse that, but just little things. Let's keep it simple for now. The site is now reloaded, so we can attach IIS Express. But in the meantime, we can take a look at the database. We have the SQL Server Compact Toolbox installed, So we can actually take a look at the database file, which is here. And just quickly take a look at a table to check whether our scheduled task was actually scheduled. And it turns out that scheduled tasks are stored in the scheduling_scheduled task record table. By the way, do take your time to take a look at the whole Orchard database to get a feeling of it. By the way, our background task was again hit, so that's good. And I will really hit F5 if Visual Studio would allow me to. And our scheduled task was also hit. But do take note, next minute the background task will be hit again, but the scheduled task won't. So I wanted to show you that we have a line here for our scheduled task in the scheduled task record, but since our scheduled task was already executed, it's not here anymore. Well, although we could restart the site, I will just touch this file, so dynamic compilation will kick in and the site will get restarted, and then we will be able to see that the record is actually there. So it's loading a bit more, and I will try to be faster this time. Okay, let's attach the debugger. Let's take a look at the table. Why can't I refresh it? And now let's see. Here we have our demo task site. So as you can see, this record was created for a task. Here is the scheduled time that we have given it. Here is the task type that we have specified. And since there was no content item, nothing is here. You don't actually need to watch it all to the end. Now, do be warned, this activity will be run every time the site starts. Well, it's actually every time the site or the tenant starts or restarts. So if you enable or disable a feature, this activity will actually called again. And every time this happens, this create task will be called. So a task will be created regardless whether it's already executed before. So you can also end up with 3 scheduled tasks. So your task will be executed 3 times. There are also other methods in the scheduled task manager. You can fetch the tasks, and you also can delete tasks. So you can use these methods to conditionally create tasks if it's an issue for you to have multiple instances of them.